Hello.
Hello.
We are here at the Salem Witch Museum with Allison DeMario, who is the Director of Education. And the first question I think I'd like to ask you, Allison, is could you give us a little background about the Witch Museum?
Sure. This originally was a church. It was built in 1845, and it became the Salem Witch Museum in 1972. So it's about 25 years old. It gives you an overview of what happened during the Salem witch trials by using life-size figures in stage sets, a soundtrack, and lighting. We have presentations every half hour, and I think people find this a very good place to start their study of the witch trials.
My other question to you is, now you are Director of Education.
Correct.
So what is your daily job responsibilities here at the Witch Museum?
I do quite a variety of things, as we all do, especially this time of year because we're extremely busy. Basically, I work on the educational aspects of the trials. I speak to schools. I've developed a curriculum that's gone out to quite a few schools by now. I come to speak to a lot of groups, historical societies, and business groups. And basically, I think I represent the research part of the history of the trials. And so I fulfill that function. Of course, I speak to television and on radio and things like that.
Okay, now, right now, there is an audio-visual presentation going on.
Right.
Now, what exactly does that entail?
It involves 13 stage sets with life-size figures in them. And each of the stage sets gives you an idea of what some of the scenes during the Salem witch trials might have looked like. For instance, there's a hanging scene, there's a courtroom scene, there's a scene in the Putnam household, there's a scene with Betty Paris, who was one of the first little girls to become ill, a prison scene, a scene depicting John Proctor. So in all there are 13, and the story gives you an idea of beginning, middle, and end of the trial. So as I said, it's a good place to get an overview of the history.
At first, no one in the town could believe it. But then her few enemies among the men Putnam's mother declared against her. His pregnant wife Elizabeth was soon accused and hailed into court as a witch. When he took the stand to defend her, he was denounced by one of the witnesses, Abigail Williams. Speak! So be it then. Soros gave this final proof of his innocence. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Now, I'm not sure of the exact number, but I know there was a lot of people in Salem that practice the Wicca religion. And do you find that they're bothered by any of this going on? Or, I know there's a little controversy with that.
Yeah. We have come to a good understanding with the members of the witch community, the Wiccan community. I have complete respect for their beliefs, and the ones that I know, the witches that I know, I don't think have any problem with this. What they do have a problem with, and I can well understand it, is the stereotypical image of the witch with a green face and a wart on her nose and a black hat and a cat. That's very demeaning. And so I can understand their concern with that. We, however, do not portray witches in that way.
Now, is this one of the more popular tourist attractions in Salem? Which there's so many, so many museums, and
I would have to say I think we're probably the most popular, and I'm not saying that in any other way except realistically. I think we get the most visitors. We're the oldest. We've been here since 1972. And I think what's nice about our presentation is that it does give you an overview. It isn't just one aspect of the trials, but a complete picture. And so I would have to say I think we're, as we say in our ads, Salem's most visited museum.
Now, you said there's no artifacts inside this museum.
No. There are very few left from that time. The documents are on deposit at the Peabody Essex Museum, and they also have some portraits, and they have, well, for instance, George Jacobs' walking stick, But there's very little left from that time. Interestingly, some new documents were found. Actually, they were old, but they were just recently found at the Suffolk County Courthouse, and those are, I think, being transliterated or put into a form that people can read and use. But other than that, there's very little from that time. I don't think people were thinking about how interesting the witch trials would be 300 years later. So, for instance, records were not kept about what happened to the young girls who were afflicted. We only know about 2 of them. And really, we don't know about many of the people who were involved in the trials, what happened to them, what they thought, what their descendants thought. So there's plenty more information that I hope someday will be discovered.
Now, do you have a lot of visitors that are from all different areas of our world visiting the Salem Witch Museum? I see that you had a lot of tourists that just left here.
Yes.
They look like they were from Japan.
Yes, we have visitors from all over the world. I think the witch trials have become fascinating to everybody in the world. So we have visitors, as I said, from everywhere you can think of, more and more as time goes on. And I find that to be very interesting. We have our presentation translated into 5 languages in addition to English, and we use those translations very often, not just for school groups, but for people who are here, school exchange groups, for people who are here visiting from other countries.
Well, Allison, I know you're very busy, and I don't want to take up much more of your time, and I appreciate your thoughts on the Salem Witch Museum, and it sounds like it's quite an interesting place to go in Salem. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Nice to talk to you.
Salem Witch Museum, and we have some numerous facts strewn around the walls about the Salem Witch Museum. One that I found interesting was the one about Doris Good was imprisoned with her mother Sarah when she was only 5 years old, and she confessed to having a little snake as a familiar. She was found to have a devil's mark on her finger. After the death of her mother and her months in prison, she was never the same. In 1710, her father, William Good, told the general court that since her imprisonment, his daughter has been ever since very chargeable, having little or no reason to govern herself. Now we're going to move on to some biographies. We have the biography of Giles Gorey. He's one of the best known of the victims of the witchcraft trials because his punishment was quite different. On September 19th, the 80-year-old man was pressed to death for refusing to grant the court of Oyer and Tremere jurisdiction over him. Giles had testified against his wife, Martha, at her trial in March and been accused of murdering a servant 17 years earlier. Giles Corey was a very stubborn old man who perhaps did not understand fully the result of his actions. Because he would not answer, "By whom will you be tried?" he was pressed to death. The images of witches and witchcraft are powerful cultural symbols, and the word witch has come to mean many things, and I feel that the Salem Witch Museum portrays witches in a very positive light.